My name is Gerald Walker, 52 years old, and I never thought I'd hear my son tell me the best birthday gift I could give him would be to disappear from his life. After raising Michael alone for the past 10 years, since his mother died from cancer, those words cut deeper than any knife. The room fell silent as everyone stared, waiting for my reaction. But instead of arguing, I simply smiled, nodded, and walked out the door. What happened just 1 hour later would change everything between us forever. While I tell you what happened when I walked away from my son's birthday party, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. If you believe sometimes tough love is the only way to heal a broken relationship. Before our world turned upside down, we were what most would consider a happy, normal family. I met Elizabeth during my final year of engineering school, when she was completing her music education degree. She had been playing piano at a local coffee shop, and I found myself returning week after week, ordering coffees I didn't even want just to hear her play. When I finally worked up the courage to talk to her, she laughed and told me she'd been wondering when I'd stop wasting money on lattes I clearly didn't enjoy. Elizabeth was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, creative, and able to find joy in the smallest moments. Where I was methodical and sometimes too serious, she brought lightness and laughter into every room. We complemented each other perfectly, and after 2 years of dating, I proposed during a hike to the summit of her favorite mountain at sunrise. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Our early years of marriage were busy but fulfilling. I established myself at a structural engineering firm, while Elizabeth taught music at the local elementary school. We bought a modest 3-bedroom home in a good neighborhood with excellent schools planning ahead for the family we hoped to have. Weekends were spent renovating our fixer-upper, exploring hiking trails or attending local music events where Elizabeth often performed. When Michael was born, our happiness felt complete. He was a healthy, curious baby, with Elizabeth's bright blue eyes and my dark hair. From the beginning, he seemed to inherit the best of both of us, my focus and determination, alongside his mother's creativity and joyful spirit. Our house filled with both the precision of building blocks and the chaos of finger painting, a perfect blend of our two personalities. As Michael grew, our family developed our own special traditions. Every Sunday, Elizabeth would play piano, while Michael and I danced around the living room like fools. Camping trips during summer breaks became annual adventures with Michael, learning to fish, identify birds, and tell stories around the campfire. Elizabeth insisted on taking thousands of photos, creating elaborate scrapbooks, documenting every milestone and mundane moment alike. Someday, we'll look back at these and remember exactly how it felt to be us right now, she would say, as she carefully arranged photos in her albums. Our most ambitious plan was a grand European tour when Michael turned 12. Elizabeth had studied abroad in college and wanted to share her love of history, architecture, and music with our son. We started a special savings account, adding to it monthly and researching destinations that would appeal to all of us. It was the big dream we worked toward as a family, something that kept us focused on the future. Then came the diagnosis that shattered everything. Elizabeth had been feeling unusually tired, but we both attributed it to her busy schedule teaching parenting and directing the school choir. When she found a lump during a routine self-exam, we worried but tried to stay optimistic. The mammogram led to a biopsy, which led to the devastating news: stage 4 breast cancer, already spread to her lymph nodes and bones. "We'll fight this," I promised, holding her hand so tightly I was afraid I might hurt her. "We'll find the best doctors, try every treatment, whatever it takes." Elizabeth, always the more pragmatic one, despite her artistic nature, simply nodded and said, "We'll fight, but we also need to prepare, for Michael's sake." The next 18 months became a blur of hospital visits, treatment plans, and trying to maintain normalcy for our 6-year-old son. Elizabeth faced chemotherapy with remarkable courage, even joking about her hair loss by letting Michael draw temporary tattoos on her bald head. On good days, she still played piano, though sometimes needing me to turn the pages when her strength failed. On bad days, she recorded videos and wrote letters for Michael's future birthdays, graduations, and wedding, determined to remain present in his life, even if the worst happened. I juggled work responsibilities with caregiving, often working remotely from hospital rooms or bringing projects home to complete after Michael went to bed. My firm was understanding, but the strain showed in missed deadlines and exhaustion that permeated every aspect of my life. Still nothing compared to watching the love of my life slowly slip away while trying to explain to our young son why Mommy was getting sicker instead of better. We tried to shield Michael from the harshest realities, but children sense more than we realize. He became quieter, more clingy, drawing pictures of doctors making his mom better and asking difficult questions neither of us were prepared to answer. How do you explain mortality to a child who has barely begun to live? Elizabeth's final decline came rapidly after a brief period of false hope. A new treatment had seemed promising, reducing some tumors. But within weeks, the cancer returned with a vengeance. When the doctors suggested hospice care, we made the difficult decision to bring her home, converting our living room into a space where she could be comfortable while remaining part of family life. On a quiet Tuesday morning in April, with spring sunshine streaming through the windows, Elizabeth asked to speak with me alone while Michael was at school. "Promise me you'll let him remember me. Happy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't let grief define his childhood. And Gerald," she grasped my hand with surprising strength, "promise you'll tell him every day how proud I am of him, how much I love him." "I promise," I managed to say through tears. "We'll be okay. Somehow." She died that afternoon, with Michael and me, beside her peaceful at the end, despite the brutal battle she had fought. She was 35 years old, and our son was just 8 too young to fully comprehend that this goodbye was permanent. The days following Elizabeth's death passed in a fog of arrangements, visitors' casseroles I couldn't eat, and trying to comfort a child whose pain I could barely fathom when my own was so overwhelming. Michael vacillated between tearful outbursts and concerning silence, sometimes climbing into my lap for comfort, and other times shutting himself in his room for hours. The first major hurdle came when Michael had to return to school. He clung to me at drop-off, terrified that if I left his sight, I might disappear too. His teacher, who had known Elizabeth well, assured me that his behavior was normal, that they would watch him closely and call if needed. That first day, I sat in my car in the school parking lot for 3 hours, unable to leave in case he needed me. Nights were the hardest. Michael's nightmares became frequent, sending him scrambling into my room crying for his mother. I would hold him, rock him back to sleep, then lie awake, wondering if I could possibly be enough for him. The silence of the house pressed in like a physical weight, the absence of Elizabeth's laughter and music, an ever-present reminder of what we had lost. My parents offered to move closer to help, but I was determined to honor Elizabeth's wishes by maintaining as much normalcy as possible for Michael. I learned to cook properly instead of relying on takeout, figured out the morning routine of school preparation, and even mastered the art of birthday party planning, when a promotion at work would have required travel. I declined it without hesitation, knowing Michael needed stability more than we needed the extra income. A grief counselor suggested that both Michael and I seek therapy, which proved to be a critical lifeline. My sessions helped me navigate my own grief while learning strategies to support Michael through his. For Michael, art therapy seemed particularly effective, allowing him to express feelings he couldn't yet verbalize. Slowly, painfully, we found our way forward. Not moving on from Elizabeth, never that, but learning to carry her memory with us in ways that brought comfort rather than only pain. I kept her photos throughout our home and spoke of her often making sure Michael knew it was safe to talk about his mom, to ask questions to keep her present in our daily lives. That first year taught me more about strength and resilience than I had learned in all my previous years combined. It showed me that even in the darkest moments, putting one foot in front of the other was sometimes victory enough. What I didn't realize then was that the challenges of raising a grieving child were only beginning, and the real tests of our relationship still lay ahead. The years following Elizabeth's death were a delicate balance of grief and growth. Michael and I developed new routines that acknowledged our loss while helping us move forward. Sunday mornings, once filled with Elizabeth's piano playing, became our pancake and story time, where we would share memories and sometimes look through Elizabeth's meticulously created photo albums together. I discovered hidden strengths I never knew I possessed. When Michael's third-grade class needed volunteers for the science fair, I stepped up, channeling Elizabeth's enthusiasm for classroom involvement. For the school talent show, I stayed up 3 nights straight, sewing a costume that would have made Elizabeth proud, even if my stitching was far from perfect. Each small victory in parenting felt like keeping a promise to her. Michael, meanwhile, showed remarkable resilience. His natural intelligence shone through as he excelled academically, particularly in science and music. His teachers often commented on his ability to focus intensely on subjects that interested him, a trait he definitely inherited from me. But he also displayed Elizabeth's empathy, often befriending new students or standing up for classmates who were being teased. The elementary school years had their challenges, certainly. Every Mother's Day brought renewed grief each of Elizabeth's birthdays, a painful reminder of her absence. The anniversary of her death would find us both quieter, often spending the day hiking on trails she had loved, feeling somehow closer to her spirit in the natural beauty she had so appreciated. During these years, Michael and I became a team. We developed inside jokes, special signals and routines that were uniquely ours. When he had trouble sleeping, we would go stargazing in the backyard, naming constellations and making up stories about them. On difficult mornings when grief felt especially heavy, we had a brave face ritual where we would make the silliest expressions possible before putting on what Michael called our regular faces to face the world. I made sure to keep Elizabeth's memory alive in positive ways. Every night before bed, I would share a different mom story with Michael. Small anecdotes about Elizabeth's life, her quirks, her passions, the way she had danced in the kitchen while cooking, or how she could identify any classical piece within 3 notes. These stories seemed to give Michael comfort, a way to know the mother whose presence in his life had been too brief. Birthdays and holidays were approached with careful planning. I wanted these occasions to be joyful, while still acknowledging Elizabeth's absence. For Michael's birthday each year, we would release a balloon with a message for his mom, a private moment before the celebrations with friends would begin. At Christmas, we maintained many of Elizabeth's traditions, including her special recipe for cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning and volunteering at the local shelter, something she had always insisted was essential to the holiday season. By the time Michael reached his 12th birthday, We had achieved a kind of equilibrium. Though the pain of loss never disappeared completely, it had softened into something more manageable, a bittersweet awareness that shaped our lives without defining them. Michael had grown into a thoughtful, intelligent preteen, with a close circle of friends and various interests, from astronomy to playing guitar, an instrument he had chosen because, as he put it, I can take it with me anywhere unlike Mom's piano. Then came middle school, and with it, the first real cracks in our solid foundation. The transition hit Michael harder than either of us expected. Moving from the small, nurturing environment of elementary school to the larger, more impersonal middle school coincided with the onset of puberty and all its accompanying emotional turbulence. Suddenly, the boy who had shared everything with me became increasingly private and moody. At first, I attributed the changes to normal adolescent development, the eye rolling the sighs of exasperation, the one-word answers to my questions, all seemed like typical teenage behavior. But as 7th grade progressed, more concerning patterns emerged. Michael's grades began to slip. Notes came home about missed assignments and classroom disruptions. The guitar that he had previously played daily gathered dust in the corner of his room. Parent-teacher conferences revealed a Michael I barely recognized. His math teacher described him as disengaged and occasionally disrespectful, while his English teacher mentioned he had been writing disturbing stories about loss and abandonment. His band instructor, who had previously praised Michael's natural talent, reported that he had stopped bringing his instrument to class altogether. "Has there been any change at home?" they asked, concern evident in their expressions. "No," I replied automatically, then reconsidered. "Well, nothing beyond the usual challenges. We've been managing since his mother passed." The slight shift in their expressions told me everything. They hadn't known. Somehow Michael had been telling his teachers and classmates that his mother was alive, creating elaborate stories about her business trips or work commitments to explain her absence at school functions. This discovery led to our first major confrontation when I asked him about it that evening. "Why would you lie about Mum?" I asked, trying to keep accusation from my voice. Michael's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I'm sick of being the kid with the dead mother. Do you know what it's like? Everyone walking on eggshells around you, giving you those pity looks, treating you like you're going to break." His outburst stunned me into momentary silence. For years I had focused on helping Michael process his grief, but I had perhaps underestimated how much her death set him apart from his peers at an age when fitting in becomes paramount. "I understand," I said carefully, "but creating stories about Mom doesn't honor her memory, Michael. And eventually the truth comes out, which can be even more painful." "You don't understand anything," he shouted, slamming his bedroom door hard enough to rattle the family photos on the hallway wall. That argument marked the beginning of a pattern. Conversations that had once flowed easily became landmines of potential conflict. Michael began challenging everything from house rules to bedtime to the meals I prepared. The more I tried to maintain structure and expectations, the more he pushed against them. By 8th grade, Michael had found a new group of friends that worried me. They were older boys with reputations for troublemaking boys whose parents seemed notably absent from school functions. When I tried to discuss my concerns, Michael would shut down completely or lash out defensively. "Just because they don't wear sweater vests and play in the band doesn't mean they're bad people." He snapped when I questioned his sudden friendship with a boy who had been suspended twice for fighting. "I'm not judging them by their clothes, Michael. I'm concerned about the choices they're making and how those choices might affect you." "Right, because I'm so easily influenced," he said sarcastically. "Maybe I'm the bad influence on them. Ever think of that?" His freshman year of high school brought even more dramatic changes. Michael's appearance transformed almost overnight. He grew his hair longer, adopted a wardrobe of exclusively black clothing, and came home one day with his ear pierced, a clear violation of our agreement that such decisions would be discussed first. Academically, he went from a solid B student to barely passing. Teachers' emails became more frequent and increasingly concerned. When I tried to help with homework, he would claim he had already completed it at school or that it wasn't due yet. Lies I would discover only when progress reports arrived. Our home, once a haven of mutual respect and shared grief, became a battleground. Simple requests to clean his room or help with dishes could trigger explosive arguments. He began staying out later, ignoring my texts and offering vague explanations about his whereabouts that I knew instinctively weren't true. The breaking point came when I found a small bag of marijuana and a half-empty bottle of vodka hidden in his closet while putting away laundry. When confronted, Michael erupted in a way I had never seen before. "You went through my stuff!" "What happened to privacy?" he shouted, face contorted with rage. "Privacy doesn't extend to illegal substances in my house, Michael. We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You're just looking for things to criticize because I'm not the perfect son you want. This isn't about being perfect. It's about making dangerous choices. You're 15, Michael. Drinking and drugs can derail your entire future." "What future?" He laughed bitterly. "The one where I become an engineer like you. Live a boring, safe life until someone I love dies, and it all falls apart anyway." His words hit like physical blows, exposing fears I had never voiced. Was I pushing him toward a life he didn't want? Had my grief somehow communicated that love inevitably leads to devastating loss? Before I could formulate a response, Michael grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "We're not finished discussing this," I called after him. "I'm finished," he said coldly. "Don't wait up." He slammed the door so hard that the framed photo of Elizabeth on the entry table crashed to the floor, the glass shattering across the hardwood. As I knelt to clean up the broken pieces, I felt as though I was gathering the fragments of our relationship, wondering if it could ever be made whole again. That night, as I waited anxiously for Michael to return home, I pulled out the letter Elizabeth had written to me before she died. Among her final thoughts and wishes was a paragraph about Michael's teenage years that now seemed prophetic. "He'll push against you, Gerald. He'll test every boundary and break your heart 12 times over. Remember that behind the anger is fear, behind the rebellion is pain. Love him through it, even when it's hardest. Especially when it's hardest." Michael returned home after midnight, slipping in quietly, clearly hoping to avoid another confrontation. I was sitting in the darkened living room, having been unable to sleep. "We'll talk tomorrow," I said softly. "I'm just glad you're safe." The surprise on his face was evident, as though he had expected shouting or punishment. He nodded once before heading upstairs, the small moment of connection giving me hope that perhaps all was not lost between us. But in the months that followed, even that small hope seemed to fade, as Michael withdrew further into his anger and rebellion, and I struggled to find the right balance between discipline and understanding, between holding on and letting go. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was failing both my son and the promise I had made to Elizabeth to guide him through life's challenges. What I didn't realize was that the true test of that promise was still to come. As Michael's 16th birthday approached, I found myself at a crossroads. His behavior had continued to deteriorate, with more school absences, declining grades, and an increasingly concerning circle of friends. Our home had become a silent battlefield, communication reduced to terse exchanges about practical matters, when we spoke at all. I consulted with Michael's therapist, Dr. Abrams, whom he had been seeing irregularly since Elizabeth's death. Her perspective was measured but concerning. Michael is dealing with typical teenage rebellion, complicated by unresolved grief, she explained. The approaching milestone of turning 16 without his mother present is likely intensifying his emotional struggles. What can I do? I asked, the weariness evident in my voice. I've tried being strict, I've tried being understanding. Nothing seems to reach him. Consistency and presence are key, she advised. Significant occasions like birthdays can be opportunities for reconnection. He may push you away, but deep down he needs to know you won't give up on him. With this guidance in mind, I decided to make Michael's 16th birthday a meaningful occasion, hoping it might serve as a bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. 16 was significant in any teenager's life, but for us it carried additional weight. Elizabeth and I had always talked about this birthday as a major milestone, planning special ways to celebrate our son's transition toward adulthood. I began preparations weeks in advance. Through careful conversations with Michael's few remaining positive influences, I learned that he had been admiring an expensive electric guitar at the local music store, stopping by frequently to play it, but knowing it was far beyond his means. Despite our strained relationship, music remained one constant in his life, a connection to both his mother's influence and his own identity. I worked extra hours and sold some of my rarely used engineering equipment to afford the guitar, seeing it as not just a birthday present, but a gesture of faith in Michael's future beyond his current struggles. Along with the guitar, I wrote him a heartfelt letter expressing my love, pride, and hope for him, acknowledging the pain we had both carried since losing Elizabeth, but emphasizing our strength in facing it together. For the celebration itself, I planned a small gathering at our home. I invited close family members, including my parents, who would drive in from 3 hours away, Elizabeth's sister Julie and her family, and a few of Michael's friends from before his recent troubling associations. I spent days cleaning the house, ordered his favorite cake from the bakery Elizabeth had always used for special occasions, and decorated with photos from throughout Michael's life, including many with Elizabeth. I also had one special surprise planned. Over the years, I had continued adding to the European trip fund that Elizabeth had started, and we now had enough for the journey we had once planned as a family. I thought perhaps the trip could serve as both a new beginning for our relationship and a way to honor Elizabeth's wishes for our son to experience the world beyond our small corner of it. The day of Michael's birthday arrived, and everything was prepared. My parents came early to help with final arrangements, bringing special family recipes and stories about my own 16th birthday that I hoped might amuse Michael. Julie brought albums of photos Elizabeth had shared with her over the years, images Michael might not have seen before. As the afternoon progressed and guests arrived, there was still no sign of Michael. My texts went unanswered, calls straight to voicemail. Julie tried to reassure me, suggesting he might be planning a grand entrance, or perhaps his friends were treating him to a pre-party celebration. But the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing hour. When Michael finally arrived 3 hours late, the party was already winding down. Some guests had reluctantly left. My mother was storing uneaten food in the refrigerator, and the carefully decorated cake sat mostly untouched on the dining room table. Michael stumbled slightly as he entered, his eyes bloodshot and clothes disheveled. The smell of alcohol was unmistakable. "Sorry I'm late," he muttered, not sounding sorry at all. Lost track of time. The remaining guests fell into an uncomfortable silence. I struggled to maintain my composure, torn between relief at his safe return, anger at his irresponsibility, and embarrassment on behalf of those who had made the effort to celebrate him. "Well, you're here now," I managed to say evenly. "We've been waiting to sing happy birthday." The awkward ceremony that followed felt like a parody of the joyful celebration I had envisioned. Michael blew out his candles without making a wish, picked at his cake without eating it, and opened the gifts from relatives with minimal acknowledgement or gratitude. Finally, it came time for my gift. I brought out the guitar case, a red bow affixed to the handle, and placed it before him. "This is from me," I said, my voice thick with emotion I couldn't fully suppress. "I hope it brings you as much joy as your mother's music brought her." Michael opened the case slowly. For a brief moment, as he gazed at the instrument, I saw a flicker of the boy I remembered, with genuine appreciation. But as quickly as it appeared, the moment passed, replaced by a carefully constructed mask of indifference. "Thanks," he said flatly, closing the case without removing the guitar. I handed him the envelope containing both my letter and the information about the European Trip Fund. "There's something else. Something special your mom and I always planned for you." Michael took the envelope but didn't open it. Instead, he looked directly at me for what felt like the first time in months and said the words that would echo in my mind for days to come. "You know what would be the best gift if you just disappeared from my life." The room fell completely silent. My mother gasped audibly. Julie's husband awkwardly suggested to the few remaining guests that perhaps they should step outside for some air. But I barely registered any of it, focused entirely on my son's cold, challenging stare. In that moment, 1,000 responses raced through my mind. I could yell, matching his cruelty with my own anger. I could break down, showing him exactly how deeply his words had wounded me. I could lecture him on respect and gratitude, on the sacrifices I had made and the love I had given. Instead, I heard Elizabeth's voice in my memory. "Behind the anger is fear, behind the rebellion is pain." Looking at my son, I saw beneath his hostile exterior to the hurting boy who had lost his mother too young, who was terrified of further loss, who perhaps pushed me away because he feared I would eventually leave anyway. And in that moment of clarity, I made a decision that went against every parental instinct I possessed. I smiled gently, nodded once, and without a word turned and walked out of my own home. As I closed the front door behind me, I heard the beginning of confused voices, Michael's Aunt Julie calling my name questioningly. But I continued to my car, got in, and drove away with no clear destination in mind, only the certainty that sometimes the most loving response is the least expected one. I drove aimlessly through familiar neighborhoods, my mind replaying Michael's words and my own unexpected response. Had I made a terrible mistake? Would my abrupt departure only confirm his worst fears about abandonment? Or would it finally break through the walls he had built around himself? Eventually, I found myself at Riverside Park, where Elizabeth and I had often brought Michael when he was younger. The swing set, where he had first swung by himself, the duck pond, where we had spent countless afternoons, feeding the birds, the picnic area, where we had celebrated so many small milestones, all looked the same, though everything else in our lives had changed so dramatically. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, finally allowing the emotions I had suppressed at the party to surface. Tears came hot and fast for the relationship I seemed to be losing with my son, for Elizabeth's absence when I needed her wisdom most, for the family we had been and might never be again. "I'm trying, Lizzie," I whispered to the evening air, "but I don't know if it's enough anymore." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, I considered my options. I could return home, attempt to salvage what remained of Michael's birthday, and try again to reach him. I could give him more space, perhaps staying with my parents for a few days to let tensions ease. Or I could pursue more drastic measures like the therapeutic wilderness program Dr. Abrams had mentioned as a last resort for troubled teens. None of these options felt right. Something told me that this moment represented a critical juncture in our relationship, that my next steps would either begin healing the rift between us or widen it beyond repair. Elizabeth had always trusted my judgment with Michael, believing I understood parts of him that even she couldn't reach. I needed to honor that trust now, when it mattered most. My phone had been silenced during my reflection, and when I finally checked it, I found 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. As I considered whether to return the calls, the phone rang again, the same unknown number. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Is this Gerald Walker?" a woman's voice asked, tense and slightly breathless. "Yes, this is Gerald. Mr. Walker, this is Martha Jenkins, your neighbor. There's been an accident. Michael's been hurt." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment as her words registered. What happened? How badly is he hurt?" "The ambulance has already taken him to Memorial Hospital," she explained. "I don't know all the details, but he was on a motorcycle that crashed near our street. Someone recognized him as your son and called me since they knew we were neighbors." "A motorcycle?" "Michael doesn't have a motorcycle," I said stupidly, as if this detail mattered at all in the moment. "I believe it belonged to one of his friends, Mr. Walker. He was conscious when they took him, but there was a lot of blood. You should get to the hospital right away." I thanked her quickly and ended the call, already running to my car. The drive to Memorial Hospital was a blur of red lights, frantic prayers, and overwhelming fear, unlike anything I had experienced since Elizabeth's final days. The thought that I might lose Michael too, especially after parting on such terrible terms, was unbearable. The emergency room was chaotic when I arrived, busy with the typical Saturday night influx of patients. I pushed my way to the registration desk, my voice unsteady, as I explained, "My son was brought in by ambulance. Michael Walker, 16 years old, motorcycle accident." The clerk typed quickly into her computer. "Yes, he's being treated in trauma room 3. Let me get someone to update you." The minutes waiting felt like hours. Finally, a tired-looking nurse emerged to speak with me. "Mr. Walker, your son has a broken collarbone, multiple lacerations requiring stitches, and a mild concussion. The doctor is with him now, but he's stable. We're waiting on some scan results to rule out internal injuries." "He's going to be okay?" I asked, needing the explicit reassurance. "Barring any complications from the scans, yes. He was lucky. The helmet likely saved his life, though it didn't prevent the concussion. Are you aware he had alcohol in his system?" I closed my eyes briefly, the confirmation of what I had suspected, adding another layer to my distress. "He was at his birthday party earlier. I left after a disagreement. I didn't know he had left the house or gotten on a motorcycle." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "Teenagers make poor decisions sometimes. The important thing is he's going to recover. Once the doctor finishes, you can see him briefly." As I sat in the waiting area, I noticed Martha Jenkins approaching. She looked worried, but offered a small, reassuring smile. "I followed the ambulance," she explained, sitting beside me. "I thought you might want some company while waiting for news." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her kindness. "The nurse says he'll be okay physically, at least." Martha nodded. "That's a relief. Do you mind if I ask what happened before the accident? Michael showed up at my house looking for you about 30 minutes after you left the party. He seemed extremely upset, almost frantic. This information startled me. He was looking for me. Did he say why?" "He said he needed to find you right away, that he had made a terrible mistake. When I told him I hadn't seen you, he borrowed my grandson's motorcycle that was parked in my driveway. I tried to stop him, but he was so determined. Said he thought he knew where you might have gone." My heart constricted at this revelation. Michael had been looking for me, had been desperate enough to take a motorcycle he likely didn't know how to ride properly, risking his safety to find me after I had walked away. Before I could process this fully, the doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Walker, Your son is asking for you. We've completed our evaluation, and while he'll need to stay overnight for observation due to the concussion, there are no signs of internal injuries. He's a very lucky young man. He led me through the emergency department to a curtained area where Michael lay on a hospital bed. The sight of him was shocking, despite the warning I'd received. His left arm was immobilized in a sling. A line of neat stitches ran along his cheekbone, and various scrapes and bruises covered what skin I could see. His eyes were closed when I entered, but they fluttered open at the sound of my footsteps. "Dad?" His voice was small, almost childlike in its vulnerability. "I'm here," I said, moving immediately to his side and carefully taking his uninjured hand. "I'm right here." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you were gone for real. I thought you weren't coming back." Of course I was coming back, I assured him, my own voice breaking. "I just needed some air, some time to think. I would never abandon you, Michael. Never. I'm sorry," he sobbed, all pretense of teenage coolness completely gone. "I didn't mean what I said. I don't want you to disappear. I was just trying to hurt you because I hurt all the time, and I don't know how to make it stop." His raw honesty broke open something that had been sealed inside me as well. "I know, son. I know you're hurting. I've been trying so hard to help, but I haven't known how to reach you." "It's not your fault," Michael insisted, wincing slightly as his movement pulled at his injuries. "Jake and the others, they've been pressuring me to prove I don't need anyone, that I'm not a mama's boy who's still crying over his mom. They said if I really wanted to be part of their group, I had to show I could cut ties with you, that I wasn't dependent." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Michael's increasingly hostile behavior, the deliberate pushing of boundaries, the cruel words at his birthday party, all part of a misguided attempt to gain acceptance from peers who had no understanding of his actual needs or values. "So at the party," I began, "they were all waiting to hear how I'd handled you." Michael admitted shame evident in his expression. "They said giving back the guitar would prove I didn't care about your approval. But when you just walked out, instead of fighting back when you actually left, I realized what I was throwing away. What if something happened to you too? What if those were the last words I ever said to you?" The fear in his voice was palpable, and I understood in that moment that beneath all his rebellion was the same frightened 8-year-old who had lost his mother and feared losing everyone else he loved. "Listen to me," I said firmly, making sure he met my eyes. "Nothing you could ever say or do would make me stop loving you or leave you permanently. You are my son, Michael. You are the most important person in my life. Even after everything I've done, the drinking, the lying, treating you like garbage, even after all of that," I confirmed without hesitation, "we're family. That doesn't mean your behavior has been okay, or that there won't be consequences. But it does mean my love isn't conditional on your perfect behavior." Michael seemed to absorb this, his breathing calming slightly. "When I couldn't find you at the house, or the park, or any of your usual places, I panicked. I thought maybe you'd actually listened to me for once." He attempted a weak joke, and really disappeared. "I just needed some time to think. Mrs. Jenkins said you took her grandson's motorcycle to look for me." He nodded, looking slightly sheepish despite his injuries. "I've never actually driven one before. Jake's been teaching me a little, but obviously not enough. I was going too fast around the corner by Elm Street and lost control." "You could have been killed." I said the reality of how close I had come to losing him hitting me anew, all because of a stupid fight. "Not just because of the fight," Michael said quietly. "Because I've been pretending I don't need you when the truth is, I'm terrified of losing you like we lost Mom. It's easier to push you away first than risk being hurt again." His insight surprised me, showing a level of self-awareness I hadn't realized he possessed. Perhaps those therapy sessions had made more impact than I'd thought, even if he had resisted them. I understand that feeling, I admitted. After your mum died, part of me wanted to keep some emotional distance from everyone. Even you sometimes, because the pain of losing her was so overwhelming. But that's not really living, is it? Michael shook his head, slightly careful of his concussion. No, and it's not what Mom would have wanted for either of us. The mention of Elizabeth spoken with genuine feeling, rather than weaponized to hurt me, felt like a breakthrough. You're right about that. She would have knocked our heads together long ago for being so stubborn. A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's battered face. She always could tell when we were being ridiculous. The doctor returned, then explaining that Michael needed rest, and that visiting hours would start again in the morning. I was reluctant to leave, but Michael squeezed my hand reassuringly. I'll be here tomorrow. He promised a reversal of our usual dynamic, where I was the one providing reassurance. We can talk more then. Maybe read the letter you wrote. I never opened it at the party. I'd like that, I said carefully, leaning down to kiss his forehead like I had when he was small. Rest now. I love you, Michael. Love you too, Dad. He replied, the words I hadn't heard from him in what felt like years, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. As I left the hospital exhausted but oddly hopeful, I realized that Michael's accident, while terrifying, might have provided the shock we both needed to break through the walls between us. Sometimes it takes nearly losing something to recognize its true value. I just wished the lesson hadn't come at such a potentially high cost. The small hospital room felt oddly peaceful in the morning light. Michael was still sleeping when I arrived at the start of visiting hours, the bruising on his face more pronounced against his pale skin. I settled quietly into the chair beside his bed, using the time to gather my thoughts about everything that had happened. When he finally stirred, his initial confusion quickly gave way to relief when he saw me. "You're here," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Of course I'm here," I replied, pouring him a cup of water from the bedside pitcher. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." He winced, adjusting his position. "Though I guess technically I hit the ground." "The doctor said you were lucky. It could have been much worse." Michael nodded soberly. "I know. When I was lying there on the road before the ambulance came, all I could think was that I might die with you believing I hated you." The raw honesty in his voice made my throat tighten. "I never believed that, Michael. Angry, yes. Pushing me away, absolutely. But hate, no. I know the difference. I know." A nurse came in to check Michael's vital signs and change his bandages, giving us both a moment to collect ourselves. After she left, promising the doctor would be by shortly to discuss discharge plans. Michael asked hesitantly, "Did you bring the letter? The one I didn't read at the party?" I had in fact retrieved the envelope from where it had been discarded on the coffee table. I handed it to him now, watching as he opened it with his good hand, and began reading the words I had so carefully composed. His expression shifted as he read from concentration to surprise, to something like remorse. "You've been saving for the Europe trip all this time?" he asked, looking up from the letter. "Even with everything that's happened between us?" "Of course," I said simply. "It was important to your mother. It's important to me. I thought it might be something we could do together this summer if you wanted to." Michael was quiet for a long moment, studying the brochures I had included. "I don't deserve this," he finally said. "After how I've treated you, the things I've done." "It's not about deserving, Michael. It's about family, about keeping promises and honoring your mother's wishes." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "That said, I think we both know things need to change between us. Yesterday was a wake-up call in more ways than one." He nodded, looking both younger and somehow older than his 16 years. I want to tell you everything. About Jake and the others, about what's been going on. It's hard to know where to start. Start wherever feels right, I encouraged him. We have time. And so in that hospital room with its antiseptic smell and monotonous beeping of machines, Michael began to unburden himself. He told me about meeting Jake during his first week of high school, how the older boy had seemed so confident and independent, qualities Michael had desperately wanted to embody. Jake's father was an alcoholic who regularly abused him verbally and sometimes physically, giving Jake a hardened exterior that masked deep wounds. He said we were all damaged. That's why we understood each other, Michael explained. Tristan's parents are super rich, but they're never home, always on business trips or vacations without him. He has a credit card with no limit, but can't remember the last time his mom hugged him. The group called themselves the Invisibles, teenagers who felt unseen by the world around them. They had created their own family of sorts, bound together by shared pain and a sense that no one else could understand their experiences. The group had rituals and tests of loyalty, each designed to prove commitment to the others above all outside relationships. The drinking and smoking weren't even about getting high, Michael admitted. It was about sharing something forbidden, proving we trusted each other with secrets. Jake said adults would never understand that they'd just try to separate us because they couldn't handle us having connections they couldn't control. As he continued, I began to understand the powerful draw these relationships had for my son. In the absence of his mother, and with his relationship with me strained, he had sought belonging and understanding wherever he could find it. The group had offered an identity, a place where his pain was not only accepted, but validated. What about Ashley? I asked, recalling hearing this name from Michael occasionally. You mentioned her before. Michael's expression softened slightly. She's different. She's not really part of the group, though she hangs out with us sometimes. Her parents are super strict religious types who would freak if they knew she was dating anyone, so we've kept it secret. She's actually the one who's been telling me I need to fix things with you. This surprised me. She sounds wise. She is. She lost her grandmother last year, and they were really close. She said, pushing people away doesn't make the pain better. It just gives you new pain on top of the old pain. He looked down at his injured arm. Guess I had to learn that lesson the hard way. Some lessons are like that, I acknowledged, though I wish this one hadn't involved a trip to the emergency room. The doctor arrived then, interrupting our conversation, to check Michael's neurological responses and discuss his recovery. The news was positive. Michael could be discharged that afternoon, with prescriptions for pain management and instructions for follow-up appointments. The concussion symptoms would need monitoring, but there were no signs of complications from his other injuries. Once we were alone again, Michael returned to our conversation with newfound determination. I need to tell you about the guitar, he said, the one you gave me for my birthday. You don't have to explain, I began, but he shook his head. No, I do. Because I want you to know it's the best gift I've ever received. I've been going to Morrison's Music every week for months to play that exact model. The guys there probably thought I was a nuisance, but they always let me test it out. His voice grew quieter. It reminded me of Mum somehow. Not because she played guitar, but because when I play music, I feel connected to her, like maybe she can hear me. The admission touched me deeply. She loved hearing you play. Even when you were just starting and hit more wrong notes than right ones, she would sit and listen like it was a professional concert. I remember, Michael said with a small smile. She never made me feel self-conscious, even when I was terrible. He hesitated, then added, Jake was the one who dared me to reject the guitar. Said if I really wanted to prove I didn't need your approval, I should turn down the thing I wanted most. It was supposed to be my final test, to be fully accepted in the group. And now, how do you feel about that test? Michael's expression hardened, like it was manipulative garbage. Real friends don't make you hurt people you love to prove yourself. I see that now. The clarity in his voice gave me hope that perhaps this experience, painful as it was, might ultimately help Michael distinguish between relationships that built him up and those that tore him down. When I get home, Michael continued, I want to start over, with therapy, with school, with everything. I know I've dug myself into a pretty deep hole with my grades and attendance, but if we talk to my teachers, maybe there's a way to salvage the semester. His willingness to take responsibility contrasted sharply with the defiant boy who had stormed out of parent-teacher conferences just months earlier. We'll figure it out together, I promised, one step at a time. Before Michael could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of a visitor. I hadn't expected Martha Jenkins, my neighbor, whose grandson's motorcycle Michael had borrowed. I hope I'm not intruding, she said hesitantly. I just wanted to see how Michael was doing and to tell you both that Kevin, my grandson, isn't angry about the motorcycle. He's just glad you're going to be okay. I'll pay for the damages, I assured her quickly, and I'll work to earn the money. Michael added, surprising me again with his maturity. It was completely my fault, and I'm really sorry for taking it without permission. Martha waved away our concerns. The bike can be fixed. People are what matter. She approached Michael's bedside, her expression softening. You know, I taught your mother in 3rd grade many years ago. She was a wonderful student, always looking out for others. She'd be proud to see you taking responsibility like this. Michael's eyes widened. You knew my mom when she was a kid. I didn't realize. Oh, yes. This town has long memories, young man. Elizabeth was special from the start. She patted his good hand gently. If you're interested, I have some class photos from those days. You might like to see them sometime. I'd like that a lot, Michael said sincerely. After Martha left, promising to drop off the photos once Michael was settled at home, a comfortable silence fell between us. So much had been said, yet there was still more to discuss, more healing to be done. But the foundation had been laid, and for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope for our future. Dad, Michael finally broke the silence. When we get home, can you help me set up the guitar? I think I'm ready to really learn to play it now. Absolutely, I replied, recognizing the request as more than just practical assistance. It was an invitation back into his life, a small but significant step toward rebuilding what had been broken between us. We'll make that the first thing we do. The 2 weeks following Michael's accident marked the beginning of what I came to think of as our reconstruction period. Just as the body requires time and proper care to heal from physical trauma, our relationship needed intentional attention and patience to recover from the emotional wounds we had both inflicted and received. Michael's discharge from the hospital was just the first step in a longer journey. His physical recovery presented immediate challenges, from the practical matter of showering with his injured arm to the pain management that made him alternately groggy and irritable. I took 2 weeks of family leave from work to help him through this initial phase, a decision my supervisor supported wholeheartedly after I explained the circumstances. Family comes first, Gerald, she had said. The bridge project will still be here when you get back. Those early days established a new pattern between us, without the distractions of school friends or my work obligations. We were forced to interact continuously, navigating the mundane aspects of daily life together. I helped Michael change his bandages, reminded him to take his medications, and drove him to follow-up appointments. He, in turn, made efforts I hadn't seen in years, thanking me for help initiating conversations and showing genuine interest in my responses. 3 days after returning home, Michael asked if we could find a family therapist. Not just for me this time, he clarified. For both of us together. I think we need someone who can help us talk to each other better. His insight impressed me, and I immediately began researching options. Dr. Abrams provided several recommendations, and after phone consultations, we selected Dr. Elena Martinez, a specialist in family systems therapy, with particular experience in grief and adolescent transitions. Our first session with Dr. Martinez was challenging but productive. She created a safe environment where difficult truths could be expressed without fear of judgment or retribution. Michael spoke openly about feeling that I expected him to handle his grief the same way I did, while I admitted to sometimes avoiding deeper conversations about Elizabeth because they felt too painful. Grief doesn't follow a timeline or a prescribed path, Dr. Martinez explained. And children often revisit their grief at new developmental stages, processing the loss differently as their understanding matures. What Michael needs at 16 may be very different from what he needed at 8. This perspective helped me understand Michael's recent struggles in a new light. His adolescent rebellion wasn't just typical teenage behavior, or even solely about peer influence. It represented a new phase of processing his mother's death as he developed his own identity and contemplated his future. As our therapy sessions continued weekly, we established new rituals at home as well. Every evening after dinner, we would spend time in what we started calling the no judgment zone, where each of us could share thoughts or feelings without fear of criticism or unwanted advice. Sometimes these conversations were profound, touching on memories of Elizabeth or fears about the future. Other times they were ordinary, discussing music preferences or complaints about hospital food. The content mattered less than the practice of open communication. Michael made the difficult decision to distance himself from Jake and most of his previous friend group. "They've been texting asking when I'm coming back to school," he told me during our second week at home. "Jake even came by when you were at the pharmacy yesterday, but I didn't answer the door." "Are you sure that's what you want?" I asked, careful to maintain neutrality, despite my personal relief. "Yeah. When I think about it now, most of our friendship was based on being angry together, not actually supporting each other. That's not real friendship." He hesitated, then added, "Ashley's been different, though. She calls every day just to check in, not to pressure me about anything." "She sounds like someone worth keeping in your life," I observed. Michael nodded thoughtfully. "She is. And there are some other people from before, from middle school and the music program, who I've kind of ignored this past year. I think I might try reconnecting with them when I go back to school." School itself presented a significant challenge. Michael had missed so many classes and assignments that making up the work seemed nearly impossible. With his arm still in a sling and follow-up appointments taking up valuable time, returning to a full schedule wasn't immediately feasible. I scheduled a meeting with his guidance counselor, Ms. Powell, who had known Michael since elementary school. Together with his teachers, we developed a modified academic plan that would allow him to complete essential coursework while deferring some classes to summer sessions or the following semester. The school administration showed remarkable flexibility, particularly after understanding the full context of Michael's situation. "Many teenagers go through difficult phases," Ms. Powell told us. "What matters is Michael's willingness to get back on track now. That shows character and deserves our support." As Michael began the process of catching up academically, working through assignments at the kitchen table, while I prepared dinner or paid bills, I noticed subtle changes in his approach to learning. Where he had previously rushed through homework with minimal effort, he now took time to understand concepts, occasionally asking for my help with math problems or feedback on essays. These moments of collaboration reminded me of his elementary school days, when homework had been a shared activity rather than a battleground. The most significant breakthrough came unexpectedly, 3 weeks after the accident, when I discovered Michael in Elizabeth's music room. This small space off the living room had remained largely untouched since her death. Her piano still positioned by the window sheet music, organized in the cabinet, just as she had left it. By unspoken agreement, we had both treated the room as a kind of memorial, entering only occasionally to dust or adjust the blinds. That afternoon, I heard piano music floating through the house, hesitant at first, but growing more confident. Following the sound, I found Michael seated at Elizabeth's piano, his injured arm now sufficiently healed to allow limited movement. He was playing Clair de Lune, one of Elizabeth's favorite pieces, which she had often performed at home on quiet evenings. I stood silently in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt this moment. Michael's technique was imperfect, his timing occasionally off due to lack of practice, but the emotion in his playing was palpable. When he finished, he sat motionless at the keyboard, head bowed slightly. "That was beautiful," I said softly, finally announcing my presence. Michael turned, not startled, but not quite meeting my eyes either. "I'm rusty. Mom would have played it better. She had 20 more years of practice," I reminded him gently. "But she would have loved hearing you play her piano again." "I stopped taking lessons after she died," he said, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "It hurt too much, reminded me too much of her. But now I don't know. It feels like a connection instead of just a reminder of what's gone." I moved further into the room, sitting in the armchair adjacent to the piano. "That's how memory works sometimes. The same things that once brought pain eventually become sources of comfort." "Do you think she can hear me playing?" Michael asked, his voice carrying the vulnerability of a much younger child. The question touched on spiritual beliefs we had rarely discussed explicitly. Elizabeth had been more traditionally religious than I was finding comfort in church services and prayer. I had always been more uncertain, more questioning, especially after her death had challenged whatever faith I possessed. "I don't know for certain," I answered honestly. "But I like to think that love creates connections that even death can't completely sever. So maybe not in a literal hearing way, but in some form. Yes, I think she knows when you're playing her music." Michael nodded, accepting this answer without further questions. "I want to start lessons again. Not just piano, but guitar, too. Music was her gift, and I don't want to waste it." "I think that's a wonderful idea," I agreed. "We could look for teachers when you feel ready to add that to your schedule." He played a few more notes, then closed the piano carefully. "Dr. Martinez asked me yesterday what I missed most about life before Mom got sick. I told her I missed how we used to be a team, the three of us. But then I realized something." "What's that?" I prompted when he paused. "We still can be a team, Dad. You and me. Different than before, but still a team. I think that's what Mom would have wanted." His words pierced straight to my heart, articulating exactly what I had been trying to build since Elizabeth's death. What had seemed so elusive during the difficult months of Michael's rebellion. "That's all I've ever wanted," I admitted. "For us to face life together, not as adversaries." "I know," Michael said simply. "I'm ready to try that now. For real this time." As we left the music room together, I felt Elizabeth's presence more strongly than I had in years. Not as a painful reminder of loss, but as a gentle affirmation that even in her absence her love continued to shape our family. The path forward would not be without challenges, but for the first time in a long while I believed we would navigate them together. 1 year passed more quickly than I could have imagined. Michael's 17th birthday approached with none of the dread or tension that had surrounded his 16th. Instead, we discussed celebration options, openly settling on a small gathering at home with a few carefully selected friends and family members. "Nothing fancy," Michael insisted. "Just people who actually care about each other, good food, and maybe some music." The contrast with the previous year's disastrous party couldn't have been more striking. Where once I had anxiously orchestrated an event designed to win back my son's affection, now we planned together as partners, each contributing ideas and respecting the other's preferences. This collaborative approach extended to all aspects of our relationship, a hard-won development that had required consistent effort from both of us. The months following Michael's accident had not been without setbacks. His physical recovery progressed steadily, but emotional healing followed a less linear path. There were days when old patterns threatened to re-emerge, when grief resurged unexpectedly, or communication broke down temporarily. The difference now was our commitment to working through these difficulties rather than allowing them to create permanent divisions. Our weekly sessions with Dr. Martinez continued providing a structured environment to address emerging issues before they could escalate. She helped us recognize triggers, develop healthier communication strategies, and understand how our individual grief processes affected our interactions. Perhaps most importantly, she encouraged us to be patient with ourselves and each other, acknowledging that healing was an ongoing journey rather than a destination. Michael returned to school on a modified schedule 6 weeks after the accident, facing the social and academic challenges with newfound maturity. As he had anticipated, reconnecting with former friends proved both rewarding and occasionally awkward. Some relationships were easily rekindled, while others had changed too much during his period of rebellion to be fully restored. His friendship with Ashley deepened and eventually evolved into a more formal relationship, one I wholeheartedly approved of after meeting her and her family. She was thoughtful and kind, with a quiet confidence that seemed to bring out the best in Michael. Her own experience with loss, though different from his, gave her an empathy that created a strong foundation for their connection. Jake made several attempts to pull Michael back into his circle, alternating between guilt trips, mockery, and appeals to their shared history. When these tactics failed, he resorted to spreading rumors about Michael's accident and recovery, painting him as weak for returning to the boring life Jake so despised. Though these attacks initially hurt Michael, they ultimately reinforced his conviction that distancing himself had been the right decision. "He's still angry at everything and everyone," Michael observed after a particularly difficult encounter at school. "I get it because I was there too, but I don't want to live like that anymore." Academically, Michael worked diligently to recover his standing. The modified plan developed with his guidance counselor provided a structured path forward, requiring summer classes and additional coursework, but allowing him to advance with his grade level. His renewed interest in music translated to other subjects as well, bringing back the intellectual curiosity that had characterized his earlier school years. At home, we continued to refine our new normal. The music room, once preserved as an untouched memorial, became a living space again, filled with the sounds of Michael's practice sessions and occasionally my own clumsy attempts to learn guitar alongside him. We established regular movie nights, cooking experiments, and weekend hiking trips, creating new traditions while honoring Elizabeth's memory in more intentional ways. On the anniversary of her death, we visited her grave together, bringing her favorite flowers and spending time sharing stories rather than standing in somber silence. Michael played a recording of a piece he had been practicing on both piano and guitar, propping his phone against the headstone so she could hear his progress. "I used to feel guilty about being happy without Mum here," he confessed as we walked back to the car. "Like enjoying anything meant I was betraying her memory somehow." "I felt the same way," I admitted. "For the longest time, laughter felt almost sacrilegious." "But that's not what she would have wanted," Michael said with certainty. "Remember how she was always the first to find something funny, even during the worst parts of her treatment. She'd be mad if she thought we stopped living, because she had to." His insight demonstrated a profound shift in his relationship with grief, moving from the angry denial that had fueled his rebellion to a more integrated understanding that allowed space for both sorrow and joy. This evolution mirrored my own journey, though I had taken considerably longer to reach similar conclusions. As we approached Michael's 17th birthday, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous year between his 16th and 17th celebrations. The painful words that had driven me from our home that day had ultimately led to a crisis point that forced us both to reevaluate everything. His accident, terrifying as it had been, created an opportunity for honesty that might otherwise have remained elusive for years. The birthday party itself was everything Michael had requested: simple, genuine, and focused on connection rather than impression. Ashley came early to help with preparations, her ease in our home reflecting the many afternoons she had spent there over the past year. My parents drove in from out of town, bringing Michael's favorite homemade cookies and stories that made him alternately laugh and cringe with embarrassment. Martha Jenkins attended with her grandson, Kevin, their presence symbolizing how even difficult circumstances could evolve into meaningful relationships. Most striking was Michael himself. At 17, he stood taller and more confident than the angry 16-year-old of the previous year. The physical traces of his accident had faded, though a small scar remained above his eyebrow, a permanent reminder of lessons harshly learned. More significant were the invisible changes, the thoughtful consideration he showed others, the easy laughter that had once been so rare, the comfort with which he now navigated both joy and sorrow. When it came time for gifts, I presented him with a custom guitar strap embossed with his initials and a small treble clef, a practical complement to the instrument he had embraced so fully over the past year. Michael opened it with genuine appreciation rather than the forced politeness or outright rejection that had characterized so many previous gift exchanges. "It's perfect, Dad. Thank you," he said sincerely. Then, unexpectedly, he retrieved a small package from his room and handed it to me. "I got something for you, too. I know it's not your birthday, but it felt right to give it today." Surprised, I unwrapped the package to find a framed photograph I had never seen before. It showed Elizabeth seated at her piano, her face turned slightly to capture a young Michael perched beside her on the bench, and me standing behind them, with a hand on each of their shoulders. All three of us were smiling, caught in a moment of perfect familial happiness. "Where did this come from?" I asked, studying the image closely. "I don't remember this photo being taken." "Mrs. Jenkins found it," Michael explained. "It was from a school recital when I was about 5. One of the parents was a photographer and captured it without us realizing. Mrs. Jenkins recognized us when she was helping organize old school archives and made a copy. The timing of the photo struck me immediately. It had been taken about a year before Elizabeth's diagnosis, during what we later came to think of as our last period of uncomplicated happiness. The three of us unaware of what lay ahead, simply enjoying a moment together. This is incredible, Michael. Thank you." My voice caught slightly on the words. "I thought maybe we could put it in the music room," he suggested. "Not as a sad reminder, but as inspiration. A reminder of why music matters to our family." "I think that's a perfect place for it," I agreed, touched by the thoughtfulness behind the gift. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and we were cleaning up together, Michael paused in the middle of collecting empty plates. "You know what I was thinking about today." "What's that?" I asked, stacking cups by the sink. "How different things would have been if you hadn't walked out last year when I said that terrible thing. If you had stayed and we'd just had another fight like usual." I considered this alternative timeline carefully. I don't know. Maybe we would have eventually found our way to a better place anyway. Or maybe we would have continued the same destructive patterns. Michael shook his head. "I think I needed that shock. Seeing you actually leave even though you were coming back, made me realize what it would really mean to lose you. Sometimes you have to see the edge of the cliff to understand how far you could fall. His metaphor was apt, if somewhat dramatic, in typical teenage fashion. Well, I'm grateful we didn't have to find out the hard way, I said, thinking of the fear that had gripped me when I received the call about his accident. Me too, Michael agreed quietly. Thanks for not giving up on me, Dad, even when I was doing my best to make you want to. That was never an option, I told him with absolute certainty. We're a team, remember your mum made sure of that. As we finished cleaning in companionable silence, I found myself thinking about Elizabeth and the journey she had set us on, knowingly or not. The path had been far rougher than any of us could have anticipated, with detours and obstacles that sometimes seemed insurmountable. Yet somehow, through stubbornness and love, and perhaps a touch of her continued guidance, we had found our way back to each other. Later that night, I placed the newly framed photograph in the music room, positioning it where it would catch the morning light. The three smiling faces looked back at me a moment from the past that somehow felt connected to our present and future. We're doing okay, Lizzie, I whispered to the empty room. It wasn't easy and it's still not perfect, but we're finding our way. He's becoming an amazing young man. You would be so proud. And somewhere, perhaps only in my heart, but real nonetheless, I felt her answer, I already am. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love, knowing it was the only way to truly reach them? Or experienced how a crisis sometimes creates the breakthrough that nothing else could achieve? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of father-son healing touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family bonds tested and strengthened through life's challenges. And if you know someone struggling with a difficult relationship, share this video as a reminder that sometimes, even in our darkest moments, unexpected light can find its way through. Thank you for being part of our journey today.